Hello, everyone. Welcome back to school, and thank you for logging in today morning for the United Women Singapore Boys Empowered webinar. I'm Aisha, manager for the Anti-Violence Programs and Outreach for United Women Singapore. Now, UWS is a local nonprofit organization that advances women's empowerment and gender equality. So today, we do have with us Juliana Pang from Visions Healthcare. Juliana is an accredited therapist and she works with individuals, couples, and families that are affected by substance or behavior addictions. And she holds a Master's of Counseling from Monash University and an International Gaming Disorder Treatment Certificate. Now, let's learn a lot more about this topic on gaming addiction and how to manage it from Juliana herself. So over to you, Juliana.
Right, good morning, everyone. I can't see you. I'm just going to be assuming that I'm talking to people who have woken up very early to come to the session. So thank you to both teachers and students for showing up. And then, of course, thank you to United Women Singapore and ITE College West as a whole for actually looking into such an important topic that's relevant to the younger generation today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the screen share. This is a topic that we're actually going to be talking about, tackling gaming addiction just one more level. Now, before I, keep going on, I think we've all learned a lesson from one of our friends from last year, which is that I need to do a tech check. If you're not able to hear me or to see the presentation, please do let our organizers know. I think Aisha and Suki are online, and you can type in the chat box if you're having any difficulty. So as Aisha shared, my name is Juliana Pang. I'm actually an addictions therapist with Promises Healthcare. Visions is the addictions department within Promises Healthcare. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that actually applies to everyone, because games is not something that only applies to the youngsters of today. We've played games since, humans have been in social groups. Some of these games here, I think the teachers might be able to connect with hopscotch, five stones. And the first digital game that I play is Pac-Man. And if you can notice, it's two-dimensional, it's flat, but it gave me, lots of joy as well. But if you ask the younger generation today, the way they describe gaming will be something completely out of this world. So before we even go into tackling the addiction, I think it's important to first understand what are we talking about when we talk about video gaming. Okay, so in the next slide, I'm going to be showing a video and there'll be some sounds and all that. So do your sound check in terms of that. Okay. Are you able to hear what's this is the quality of the video games that we have in the gaming world today. Look at it, it's a quality, highly designed, very immersive, almost human-like. I'm gonna let you enjoy it for a while.
What sayest thou, Master Matoya? We may accept this fate or defy it, but we cannot deny it.
So you see, I mean, I'm sure some of the teachers will be amazed at, the quality of the images here. So we're talking to the students really about, do you want to choose between a world where you're saving mankind? You're going to be a hero, you're going to get superpowers, and hey, let's pay attention to our homework, talk to our teachers, deal with our teenagers' life and all the things that come with being a teenagers. It's really a tough fight between the two, right? Having to choose between the two. So that's interesting, right? But Apart from the gaming itself, we're also dealing with more than that. We're dealing with actually a lot of social media. Okay, so apart from the game itself, we start to actually have communication platforms that we can talk about gaming, we can socialize with friends, and most of us would at least have about 5 to 6 social apps at the minimum that we usually go to as a habit. And also, if you look at what we have here in terms of devices, no longer are we talking about accessing, digital based on one device. Long time ago, we have a pager and sometimes the luxury of a phone. But today, our world is actually bombarded with PCs, laptops, smartphones, digital cameras, smart cameras, even our fridge, has a digital component that's interactive. So it's actually a combination of not just the gaming, the social media, all other devices that in our life are digitized as well. Okay. Now, not only are we looking at devices, changes in terms of technology, a whole new vocabulary has developed around the gaming world. So we're talking to people with words that are not in the vocabulary of the generation before. And if you're not a gamer, what's a massively, online, role-playing game? What's a battle royale? You start to have concepts that's created specifically for the gaming world. Why are your kids spending money? Why is there a loot box, which is like a gambling box? Why is there a gacha, which is like an online vending machine? And an in-game currency. So money is no longer the concrete money that we're talking about. So what we have is not just the devices, the technology, it's a whole new language and a whole new world that's created that draws the gamers into the scenario itself. Okay. So let's take a look at, okay, so yes, our world is, bombarded with all things digital. Then what's acceptable and what's not acceptable? So most people, and I'm talking about working adults, so based on, data that's received, most people spend about 6 to 7 hours if you're a fully working adult, with about 4 to 5 hours at the workplace. But for people who are of a much younger generation or much younger age, this amount of timing is actually not recommended. So if you see, people are generally doing more than the recommended hours. Okay, for American Pediatric Academy, the recommended hours for people is 2 hours on gaming, okay, and maybe 1 or 2 hours on any other items. So if you look at this, you can technically play about a game within an hour. Okay, so just one level. And you can actually then spend time on TV, or you can do a bit of surfing, and that's to keep within the 3 to 4 hours a day time frame. Now, I'm hearing a lot of groans from the teenagers now. On the other side of the screen is like, how is that even possible? And that is a true issue, right? Because let's have a look over here on the left side. Inventory of screen time. If we just do a little bit here and there, if I spend 2 hours on my game console, 2 hours on my TV, 2 hours on my laptop doing schoolwork, and then I just scroll through my mobile phone with about 5 to 6 apps, we will actually spend up to 9 hours a day, and we exceed the amount of time spent on screen without fully realizing that we are doing so. Okay, so it's very easy to cross the line without actually consciously meaning to do so. Okay. Now, games are not all bad. So games have a value, as I shared earlier, right? We have been playing games in different forms throughout human history. And video gamings actually do have some benefits, okay? It actually improves your ability to multitask. So we are actually dealing with a lot of stimulus when we're playing a video game. And we do have a very quick response because you have to respond to how the games actually throws a stimulus at you with good hand-eye coordination. And what a lot of teenagers value is actually the instant community. If you're saying that, oh, you know what, I play Fortnite, or I play World of Warcraft, or I play Solitaire, once you've identified the game, you have a point of connection with another person, and straight away you have a sense of belonging, which is important to teenagers. However, the challenge here is this, right? There's also a lot of downside. Okay, there's a lot of negative effects that come from a lot of extensive screen time. And I want to refer here to the blue light. Now, in the screen, we actually have a lot of blue colored wavelengths. And it's very similar to daylight. In daylight, we also have a lot of blue wavelength. Hence, a lot of gamers actually have issues with actually going to sleep because the eyes are tricking the brain to say that because there's a lot of blue light, it's not nighttime yet. And so we don't release melatonin. And so we don't actually calm the body down and be able to get into a sleep mode. So this is where the challenge is, right? So if you are actually playing a game or on the mobile phone in night, you actually find it much, much harder to go to bed because your brain is tricked into thinking that it's daytime and you need to stay awake. The second thing is the hypoarousal. People talk about mood change, aggression from too much gaming. And the whole reason is, as you saw from the earlier video clip, everything is so lifelike. You know, the challenges are lifelike. The threats to life is so lifelike that the brain again is being tricked into thinking that you are in a fight or flight mode when you're playing a game. So there's a lot of hyperarousal as well. And this is also explaining why sometimes if people interrupt you in the middle of the game, guess what? Your first reaction is fight or flight. So you can tend to be a lot more aggressive than you normally would be. So I have a lot of parents saying, oh, I don't recognize my kid anymore. You know, they've become so aggressive and they come in and they shout at me and they want me out of the room. And it's primarily because of the hyperarousal. Okay. The third thing, we are also seeing a lot of obesity or unhealthy bodies in a lot of gamers is what we call metabolic syndrome. So if we actually sit down for long hours, all the blood is actually flowing up to our heads and to our hands. So these are the two areas that get the most stimulus. But the rest of our body, you know, from chest downwards to the legs, there's a lot of accumulation of fats because your metabolic rate actually slows down and all your blood flow actually goes to the upper part of your body. So you tend to also have a lot of health reasons, unhealthy, either obesity, high blood pressure, and also we're starting to see diabetes as well. Okay. Now, apart from that, there's also social consequences, financial, if you're spending money on loot boxes or game characters or in-game currency, right? And finally, social isolation. Most of the kids would shut the room and actually continue playing inside rather than go outdoors and interact with people. Okay. Now, because it's on the spectrum, there's the good, there's the bad, there's also the ugly. And what I'm about to share here, I have to give you a bit of trigger warning. So for anyone who feels, triggered by any suicidal ideas, you can talk to your teachers about that. So on the right-hand side here, we have a character by the name of Rackful, who's actually a really famous World of Warcraft player. And at the height of his fame, he has almost close to 1 million followers online. And Rackful actually took his life at the age of 31 when he's actually just about to get married to his fiancée. However, if you look at the messages that he's posted here, he actually described himself as having been in a state of insanity, that he's no longer actually in control of his actions and he's not thinking rationally. So you can actually play a game to the point where you're no longer in contact with the physical world. We describe it as a physical world. Okay, so there's a pattern of gaming behavior that comes about. And also there's impact control. So you start to lose control over the kind of gaming that you play, the amount of hours, and more your life just starts to revolve around the gaming and nothing else. And even when you feel that there's something going wrong, you can't just seem to pull yourself out of it. Okay, and in order to make a proper diagnosis for us, we're looking at least a year or more of such effects. Especially when the functions are being affected. So not being able to attend school, no longer being a family member in terms of, checking out and withdrawing into their rooms. Okay. And when this happens, it's really a serious incidence of addiction. Okay. So these are some of the instructions that I like to share with the teachers. Now, I'm going to share some gaming behaviors, or you can describe it as screen time behaviors in the next slide. Okay, and teachers in the classroom, maybe you would like to ask your students to put up your hands, in terms of how many of the behaviors that they will see. And you can go in terms of 3 questions, asking them in terms of 4, in terms of 6, in terms of 9. Where 4, we are looking at risk, 6, problematic, and 9 is addiction. So what are these behaviors that we are talking about? For example, I play because I cannot stop. I neglect schoolwork. I'm isolated from the family. I only have internet friends. Gaming's the only thing I do. I don't do anything else other than gaming. I start to have more anxiety, depression, and no amount of gaming is enough. I have an issue with basic hygiene. I engage in no or almost no exercise at all. I stay up all night gaming, or I'm defiant about limited gaming. So I'll give you a couple of minutes for the teachers to actually check in with the students. And I'll try and look into the chat box to see if any teachers have people with 9 or more. Okay, I'm seeing the chat box being typed in. 5 students with 4 items. Okay, not too bad. You have one who tick all the boxes, and one of the teachers say he actually has 2. Okay. No response from one class. So to this teacher, I would say probably they are checking more items than that, and they're a bit shy about sharing it. Okay. Okay, he's in school now, so can't be that bad. Okay. 7 students stay late for gaming. Okay, so check with them if these are some of the problematic behaviors that they actually show. Too many items. All right. So the question is why is it so difficult then to actually stop the gaming itself? So there's actually a research done by Indiana University School of Medicine is that they put 2 groups of people, actually one group as a control group, all right, for 2 weeks in a camp with no video games, and the other group 2 weeks in a camp with video game playing, and they're only playing an average of 2 hours a day. And if you look at the way the brain scan is, so they did an MRI scan after that, and you notice that in the group that's actually in the control group, the brain actually has a lot more areas of functionality. So different parts of your brain are being activated when you interact with them, versus the kids who are actually fully gaming for only just 2 hours a day. And you notice that it's very much concentrated on a few areas, which is primarily their limbic response, their visual, all right, and sound. All right. The rest of the functions in terms of, being able to interact with the environment, being able to make rational decisions, the brain functionality does not light up, which means less activity in those areas than most. So it also makes it much harder for people who are constantly gaming to make what we would term as rational decisions. It's more focused on the visual and the response. Okay. The second thing that we need to know is that games, because it's so enjoyable, I'm sure all the teachers were quite impressed with, the little clip of Final Fantasy that I shared, right? Just watching it for a minute or so, we actually feel the enjoyment. And when we feel a sense of enjoyment, there's something in our brain that's being released. All right, it's the same as when we see our favorite food or a favorite experience. There's a sense of reward dopamine. Okay, and when we game, we have that rush. But then when we stop gaming, the rush actually goes away because it's actually temporary. Okay, so the brain gets the wrong message that, oh, yep, on the game, I don't need to produce natural dopamine, okay, because he's getting enough from that high intensity game and he's getting lots of dopamine already. And what happens is that you start to suffer withdrawal symptoms and you crave and crave more and more of the gaming in order to feel good again. So when people actually game a lot, they start to feel that other things in life are less interesting and gaming is the only way they can feel the rush. Okay. Now for teachers and parents, we would like to highlight that apart from the gaming, apart from the screen time, there are other factors at risk that we should be actually taking note of, especially when it's mental health, family risk, other form of addiction. If there's gambling, drinking in the family, or there's bullying in the school, or trauma, all right, all of that actually requires immediate attention, and we should refer to healthcare professionals immediately. Yeah. Now, in order to say, okay, so the first part is really understanding why we're where we are, right? The second part of this deck is really, okay, let's understand why is it that games are so attractive, right? Because we know the good, we know the bad, and still people continue. And the reason for that is that a lot of the games these days are actually designed by psychologists, and they have put in place motivational factors into the gaming design itself. So video gaming design is actually a huge business. So they make sure that games give, the player a sense of purpose. And here it describes a safe place. A safe place means predictability. So humans in general do not like unpredictability. So there is a sense of predictability when you go into the gaming. And by that, you know the world, you know the names, you know the characters, you know who's going to be on. And which also makes it very difficult to get the teenagers or the gamers to shift from playing something to another type of game. So you'll notice that they'll be addicted to a particular type of game, and not if you let them play something else, they have no interest. Okay. The other thing is also this very rapid measurable growth. Every level you get some sense of reward compared to real life or physical world. You might have to study a whole year before you get a grade or a passing, right? And that doesn't reward the person enough. And one of the key things that we find is very difficult to shift is the sense of belonging, that instant community that I was talking about. If I'm playing a particular game, straight away there's a bond that I have with you. And then after that, we go onto our social media platform. Like here, we have Discord, this smiley face here, and we chat with people who play the game. We learn skills together. We interact in more ways than just the gaming. Okay. The other thing that's also very important that holds the kids into the game is punishment for not playing. So you start to lose your ranking, and it's embarrassing, right? Compared to your friends, you're not at the same level that they're at, or if you don't have the kind of weaponry or rewards that other students, other kids may have. So there's actually a punishment component if you don't play. So this is classic Skinner's, conditioning of behaviors. I give you lots and lots of measurable growth rewards, and then I punish you if you don't do it. And so this double whammy effect makes it very, very addictive. So then what can we do? So really it's about, hey, going back to the old world in a sense, right? On the right hand side, you see this 15 years ago, our computer was a way to escape from our physical world and go somewhere, for a moment. And today a lot of people are saying, well, I'm spending way too much time on screen, and the physical world is actually where I'm going to be escaping from. Now, when we find replacement activities to fill the void, all right, the key thing is actually to understand the games that, the person likes to play and what they like about them. Because once you understand the type of games that you play and you like, you are more likely to find a replacement activity that actually appeals to you. So it's like if I'm very into action-oriented games, it's less likely that the person will feel that with study time. Okay, it's more likely that the person would say go on to doing a competitive sport. So understanding the type of games that they play help you to find other activities to fill the void that would appeal to that particular individual. Okay, self-help tip, socialize and connect. You can find people with common interests. You can be part of a team activity. You can volunteer service. The whole sense of belonging on the game itself can be replaced if you manage to find, a sports club or a game club, and that gives you also a sense of belonging in school. Body and mind fitness, right? So in terms of exercise and sports, critical because we talked about the metabolic syndrome. Remember the obesity, the diabetes, all the blood flowing only to the hands and the brain, and the rest of your body is actually accumulating fats, right? So nutrition, exercise is key. Okay, and then being a mindful gamer, what does that mean? It could be as simple as at the end of every hour, I get up, walk to take a drink, have a chat with someone, go to a toilet breaks. It's amazing. Gamers have, amazing bladders who don't actually need to empty their bladders until they finish the game. No, it's just actually every hour, just take a walk, move around. The whole point is to detach from the world that you've been so immersed in. And this will counteract the hyperarousal and the fight-flight syndrome because you start to orientate back to the physical world where everything is still calm, is still normal, everything is functioning, and you don't have to be in the anxious state that you were while you were actively gaming. Okay. Self-help tip number 5, boundaries, right? You must have agreed limits to your devices, Wi-Fi, data plan access, because what we saw from Redfield's experiences, you start to lose rationality. So trusting a person to then self-regulate at this point is not quite practical. The best way is actually to have agreed limits and to measure the usage based on schedules, not on quantity of time. It's very hard to track time when you're actually immersed in the gaming. So have a clock and have the time of the clock be your guide. Okay, turn off your autoplay and notification because you know that you're being punished for not playing. So you constantly get the reminders from the game, and that's not helpful. So turn it off. And if you see on the right hand side, a colored screen and what we call a grayscale screen. So like maybe an hour before you go to bed, set it to grayscale screen so that your brain stops getting the blue light. It starts to believe that, okay, so it's no longer daytime and we need to actually shut down. Okay, but the most important tip of all is not to keep a problem in secrecy. Don't try to deal with it alone because you might not be able to solve a problem, but the more people you tell, you're more likely to find someone who will. Okay, so that really wraps up my presentation, and I see that I'm right smack on time. If there's anything that you need, please do let UWS know so that they can actually come back to me. Okay, I'm going to give the screen back to the organizer.
Hi, Juliana. Thank you so much. I think I want to give a few minutes to see whether any teachers or students would like to ask you a question. It's not every day that we have a gaming addiction expert here who can share. I think those are some real tips and some great ideas actually. So I mean, if you like gaming and you're into FIFA, then you're looking at perhaps replacing that with more in-person sports, right? Activities. Is that what you mean by that, Juliana?
Yeah, that's right. So really it's looking at the type of interest. So a lot of times we try to force the kids to have the replacement activity, and we may actually give them the wrong type, right? And if you give them the wrong type, they're going to resist because it doesn't give them the same sense of enjoyment. So if they do like the sporting games, then do replace it with a physical sporting event. If they like a strategy game, then maybe a board game might be more interesting to them. Having that replacement in the right kind of motivation.
That's great. That's great. Anyone has any questions?
Very shy Singaporean audience.
Yeah, I think gaming. I wouldn't say necessary gaming addiction. It happens to both all genders, right? Both girls and
Yeah,
boys as well. I think
that's
there are
right.
games that appeal to the different genders, lah. But we know that it's made addictive because that's the tools that's being used to keep you playing and things like that.
Yeah.
What would you say is one little practice that you want someone who likes gaming still, but need to try moderate a little bit of the activity so that you have a bit of variety in the day, focusing on school and personal time with your family and friends. Yeah.
So first start with actually looking at, take stock, right? Because we often don't realize that we're actually gaming more than we are, right? As I shared with you when taking inventory, it's like little bits of time add up. You might think, oh, it's just 2 hours, but then it's 2 hours of this plus another 2 hours on the social apps, plus another 1 or 2 hours on your laptop for schoolwork. And actually, that's quite a bit of time taken up. So the best way is just to start introducing some activity that will take you outdoors. So you don't think so much of tackling the gaming, but just actually building up your life outside. Okay, so it could be meeting up with friends actually face to face, going out for a coffee, buy a bubble tea. I don't know what's the trend now. Just being able to get out of the house and meet people. And if you notice that you've been just taking food at the table, in front of your screen, just, having once or twice a week, having a meal with someone in the family or having a meal with friends, so that you actually take your eyes away. Remember, it's about the eyes to the screen. That's actually really where the addiction component gets fed into the brain.
I have an interesting question here. What if, one of the students have a brother with that gaming addiction? What kind of help should he seek? How do you support like a family member or friend you see that is struggling with it?
So there's two parts to it. So first of all, of course, the family members can seek help in the sense of knowing how to manage in terms of the gaming. So the kind of language that they need to speak to the child with, and they need to actually understand how to approach it, because gaming in itself, we have the good, the bad, the ugly, right? So it's not a complete no, right? So unless the person is in a very deep addiction state where I'm not waking up, and I've had clients who isolate themselves for about 5 to 6 months without seeing anyone. Now, in those cases, we do have to do a full detox, or what we call a gaming fast, where they stop completely. But for most of the clients that we see, it's just, going a little bit over. All right, you might be doing 4 to 6 hours, so it's a bit too much. So it's about having a conversation with them to understand, what other areas that in their life that actually need, a bit more help in. Okay, often is to escape from environments that they are not so happy with, whether it's at school, whether it's conflicts at home, with other issues that they need to deal with. So a family member can start by trying to understand. Yeah, and trying to understand not just the person, but also trying to understand the gaming world, because you would then get a lot of clues about why the person is so engaged in it. Is it because the person is lacking in certain motivational factors that they get in the physical world, and it's being replaced in the gaming world? So family members can learn a lot from us in terms of the language, the type of motivation, and how to communicate with the person. Yeah.
I have interesting question here. When you talk about that gaming fast, what's the
Uh-huh.
symptoms that the person goes through actually if they don't
If they
uh
stop, is it?
suddenly stop, or they take this full detox, they try to do it themselves? What are the symptoms that you've seen so far?
Yeah, so if they want to do a detox, usually we have to prepare them, because generally there will be a lot of resistance. So with problem gamers, they are quite defiant for the reasons that I explained earlier, because you have a sense of belonging, a loyalty to the game and to other people who are actually playing the game. There is a sense of, you have a part and role to play within it. So first and foremost, it is about having that conversation to explain why. So one of the things that a lot of gamers don't know is the conditions that they have, which is the isolation, the loss of interest in everything, and the self-isolation is all actually as a result of the way games have been designed to entrap them. So it's like walking into a maze. You don't plan to be trapped in the maze, but you're now trapped. So getting them to understand that goes a long way to actually getting their agreement to start. And then we have to also prepare the family, because it's not just the child who is fasting, it's also the people around them have to demonstrate and role model good behavior. So if the father or the mom is actually on the mobile phone 24/7, that's not going to work out very well. So preparing the family members to have what is agreed norms as well. Yeah. Usually there will be a bit of resistance, but when they are at the stage where they need fasting, it usually means that they need help and they realize it, and they're often exhibiting signs of depression, and physically you can notice that they're no longer in a state of self-care. And the immediate effect is that you might resist it for a day, and most people would report actually feeling a little bit better already over the next few days. So it's quite fast.
That's great.
Sleep, especially for a young person, right, comes back really powerfully. So you basically go into a very good rest period. Okay. Now that being said, it doesn't mean that you don't feel the urge of, wanting to game again, because your dopamine will still try to kick in and say you need to go and look for what gives you that joy, right? So then we have to teach them coping behavior. So there will be a bit of tug and war after that. And it's usually not in the first few days, because the first few days you can still pretty much just resting, and then after that you start to have your cravings again.
Wow. Wow. I think that's really extensive, but it's very good to know for us that this is similar and as serious as other addictions as well. I have quite a few interesting questions now coming up. What's your thoughts, on China's policy on banning gaming? Yeah.
I think it only happens in China because they can.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Mhm.
yeah, so I think in practical terms, it's not quite possible, but the 3 hours guide is actually a helpful guide, because we do not recognize that if every hour they actually take their breaks, they stop, they pause, they go and do something else, you'll find that they are more able to actually have a more functional life in terms of gaming, and it doesn't actually overtakes it. Right. And I don't mean to scare, people in terms of the impact of the games. In some of the high stimulant game, an hour of the game is almost like a shot of a stimulant into your body. So it's quite similar to the level of stimulus and dopamine release as a stimulant drug. So that's why you need to pull the person out so that they're not constantly being stimulated at that level. Yeah. So the 3 hours for them is a good guide, but whether a ban is possible in any other countries but China. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Juliana, for sharing with us your time and your
Yeah.
expertise. We've now
Sure.
come to the end of the event. I think some of the students also have another webinar to attend to. But it's been
Okay.
a pleasure, being with you today. We will definitely share with the school and the teachers, some of the slides and perhaps the recording of this session, so that they can perhaps watch it post event. But I would like to first thank our wonderful speaker, Juliana, who have taken the time out of a personal and professional schedule to be here with you. And not forgetting you, our participants. We understand, with everything happening in our world, so many of us very overwhelmed right now. So just a reminder, check in with yourself and always ask for help or support when you need it. Okay, so now your perspective matters to us. On the left side is the QR code for UWS, and on the right, there is another QR code from the school as well. So I hope to see you soon, and we love to hear from you. Have a great school year and take care. Thank you so much, Juliana. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.